up, everybody? Thanks again for joining me on the next episode of In the Pink. And if you are not familiar with what that term means, that's a term coined way back in the 1500s before pink was even a color. And it has to do with wishing someone their optimum health and happiness. So this week we are gonna touch on gut health, and we are filling in that blank with attention deficit disorders. But as always, we're always gonna start out with the what we know. So my first what we know that our gut is populated with trillions of bacteria. And this collectively is known as our gut microbiome, and it basically has everything to do with everything. But not only that, they have also determined there is a gut-brain axis, and this has to do with the communication between our gut and our brain. And my next what we know that the prevalence of these attention deficit or even hyperactivity disorders are going off the charts, to the tune of 6 million kiddos, or basically 10% of the kids in the age bracket of 3 to 17 have been diagnosed with these disorders. And that's in the United States alone. On a global scale, it's affecting about 7.2% of kids and 3.4% of adults. It's kind of a big deal. And my last what we know that more and more research and more studies are being done studying the gut microbiome as a whole. Studies are also showing that people with ADHD have a different gut microbiome than those who do not. For instance, one of the studies they did, they took gut microbes from people that had ADHD and they transferred them into mice. And lo and behold, it's a matter of time and these mice are starting to exhibit these behaviors that are prevalent in patients with ADHD. All right, it's time to move on. Let's move on to the gut's role in all this. So if the study didn't intrigue you on the mice, let me give you another one. This is a recent study done in 2022 where they took the microbiome of infants, about 314 of them, collecting these samples and looking for what type of microbes were prevalent. Then later on, they did it again at about 6 months. Now, after 59 of these kids had been diagnosed with ADHD, they took samples of that gut microbiome again, and they found that there are distinct differences in this gut microbiome in the group of kids that have been diagnosed with ADHD and the group that had not. And they're making connections now that this can start at infancy. Pretty fascinating stuff, you guys. All right, let's move on to another recent study done in Taiwan. This group of scientists wanted to determine how the mycobiome, not the microbiome, they're different. So mycobiome was studying or looking for fungal changes in our gut bacteria. So they took a study of 70 individuals. 35 of them had ADHD, 35 of them did not. And they studied what was going on in those folks' gut microbiome. And yes, they did find that the levels of these fungi differed vastly from group to group. There were 2 fungi, they stood out in that study. However, they are not well known and there's really no idea what those 2 fungi even do, but they were there. But the last one they found was different is Candida. And that, of course, we know is a yeast, and scientists are well versed in Candida when it takes over into our gut microbiome. And another thing, we know that Candida increases the permeability of the gut lining. And when the permeability of the gut lining is compromised, that causes inflammation in our bodies. All right, so that makes us move on to the next point here. Let's look at gut inflammation and how these fungi affected it. Okay, so we do know our intestinal wall has basically 2 jobs. It needs to absorb nutrients from our food, and it needs to be that protective barrier that is not permitting proteins and other things to be leaking out into our system. We want that gut lining intact and strong. Now going back to the study again, where they found that these 2 fungi had differing levels. One was higher and one was lower. So it was not normal in comparison to their control group, okay? But they did have this rise in Candida. And like we just said, Candida can wreak havoc when it comes to inflammation. Now we know that this gut-brain axis is where these transmissions occur from our brain to our gut. And gut permeability affects that as well. And I think it's also worth remembering that this gut permeability and inflammation, that's all tied in even to the immune response and how our immune system functions. Once again, it's all circular. Okay, let's move on to another little juncture here. Let's look at how this gut inflammation may influence this ADHD. Well, of course, studies in this realm are pretty new, but it leaves a lot of questions unanswered. So another area they're looking into here. So just like our gut is a protective barrier, there's also a protective barrier around our brain called the blood-brain barrier. And it serves the same type of purpose. So basically preventing stuff in our blood from getting into our brain that should not. And what some of these studies are pointing to is that they're showing when this gut permeability is compromised, they're showing this blood-brain permeability also follows suit. So a case in point here, these studies are focusing on a different pathway called this kynurenine pathway. So we'll back it up a minute. We know that in our gut, microbes will take amino acids like tryptophan and convert it to serotonin, right? A neurotransmitter. But some pathogenic microbes don't do this conversion, okay? But what they do is they convert tryptophan into this kynurenine. And these happen to cross the blood-brain barrier and cause inflammation, then neuroinflammation. And this kynurenine pathway, as they call it, seems to be much more responsive or sensitive in patients that do struggle with these neurological disorders, ADHD being one of them. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to some healthy practices. What are some things we can be doing on a daily basis that are going to keep us in a healthy place? Well, as always, we're always gonna start with diet. It's an easy place to start where changes can be made that can make significant changes in your health. So the first thing, try and focus on a more plant-based diet. And I mean diverse sources from all colors of the color wheel. These are the plants that are rich and dense in nutrients that our body needs and craves. Start looking at higher fiber foods. Start looking at foods that are rich in omegas. And of course, start cutting back on processed foods and foods that are basically all sugar. Okay, the next thing, prioritize sleep. Sleep is tied into so many things. We need proper sleep for our bodies to function. And of course, when we are talking specifically about ADHD, symptoms are going to be exacerbated when patients are not getting proper amounts of sleep. The next thing, exercise. Move your body. Studies even have shown this specifically for ADHD patients. If patients can get out and moderately exercise even, that is going to decrease their symptoms and behaviors. And the last and final thing, try and get into the great outdoors. I found this very fascinating when this was added in some of the things I was reading. But when you think about it, getting outside, touching the dirt, being in the environment, it all works towards our immune system, which, like I said before, all plays into this. And the beauty of that too, it's shown to decrease stress. And we know that stress is gonna wreak havoc on all areas of our health, including this one. All right, it's time to talk Plexus. Let's talk some Plexus and how Plexus can help you get into a more optimum health picture. Well, as always, we're gonna start with TRIPLEX. We're starting with that microbiome activating slim, the PROBIO 5, and the BIOCLEANSE. Getting your gut balanced again is extremely important, not only for the symptoms that we're talking about today, but just in your general health as a whole. And I would be amiss if I didn't add VITALBIOME to that picture as well, because getting this diverse population of good microbes planted in our gut makes all the difference. The next one I want to touch on is the EASE capsules for obvious reasons. The EASE is great for de-poofing our cells at a cellular level. So even if you don't consider yourself to be in discomfort, the EASE is a fantastic product for so many reasons. And the last thing I'm going to touch on, the edge. Honestly, if attention is your thing where you struggle, the edge is made specifically for mental clarity and mental focus. All right, you guys, that's all I have for you this week. I hope you have gained a little more insight on why gut health is so important in every avenue and every aspect of our life. And if you are new to this Plexus train and have no idea what I am talking about, I'm gonna list in that description box my link. Get on there, nose around, ask me some questions. Curiosity will get you on this train every time. I'm also gonna list in that description box some videos I've done in the past. So if you'd like to catch a little more information on the products I've shot out there today, that is where you can find those easy links. I'm also gonna include our current playlist right up here, so if you wanna catch a few more episodes, they'll be easy for you to find. And you might just wanna join me here again next week, because what happens in the gut does not stay in the gut. It affects everything, which is gonna lead into many more episodes of In the Pink.